Thank you for joining Wars of the Roses. As we continue with part 16, The Vein of Evidence in the Third Degree, from The Lost Word, Its Hidden Meaning by George H. Steinmetz. Chapter 15, The Vein of Evidence in the Third Degree. It is in the third degree that one encounters the veiled references from which the secret doctrine may be adduced, and that is exactly where it should be discovered, for the master's degree is the spiritual degree of Freemasonry. That the third degree deals with the spiritual, no qualified Masonic authority will dispute. The very preparation adopts the ancient custom of removing the shoes from the feet, for the ground upon which thou standeth is holy. The fellow craft, having acquired self-consciousness and a reasoning mind, has used them to acquire knowledge, and that knowledge acquaints him with the verity of the spiritual. He begins his journey to attain thereto. Though he believes in the immortality of the human soul, as a Mason, his quest is a sad farce if it must end in death before attainment. We prefer to believe with Brother Waite that it is no glorious dream, but that which under God is possible here and now. Even the color of the lodge, blue, which has given rise to the expression Blue Lodge, conveys a veiled hint. The explanation found in the ritual states that our ancient brethren held their meetings on high hills and in low vales. Thus, the blue sky was the covering of their lodges. This is further corroborated by the ritualistic explanation of the covering of a lodge, which is said to be no less than the clouded canopy or star-decked heavens. This is but the exoteric explanation. What is its deeper significance? The Hebrew word teklet or teklet means blue and comes from a root meaning perfection. Thus it is seen that Blue Lodge is Perfection Lodge, and the very name is indicative of that state of being for which one strives, not immortality hereafter which all Masons profess to believe they will then attain, but a realization of that immortality here and now, cosmic consciousness. It has been proven beyond reasonable doubt that the compasses are a symbol of the equilateral triangle, which in turn is a symbol of deity. Inverted, the symbol of spiritual man and likewise of the spiritual state in general. The reception of the candidate is therefore significant and has meaning far beyond the exoteric explanation proffered him at the time. Likewise, it has an equally deeper import than that contained in the explanation given at the time. One is cautioned never to lose sight of that invaluable instrument. Truly can it be called an invaluable instrument when its significance as a symbol of the spiritual is realized? The compasses remind us to circumscribe our desires and keep our passions in due bounds, and the obvious inference is that this is a means of gaining the end sought. There is a statement in the Bhagavad Gita which reveals how important is the control of the passions to the individual who aspires to obtain the Master's word, and all which such attainment connotes. There is a path to spirit which those well learned in the Vedas call the imperishable, that path upon which the strong men who have mastered their minds, the true fellow crafts, and controlled their passions, the master Masons, seek to tread. The step is a combination of the two preceding steps, and we recall that the advent of the spiritual into matter is the cause of the birth of the psychical. Admittedly, this symbolism is a bit awkward, but this is excusable when one realizes the extreme difficulty of finding material analogies for abstractions. The compasses now dominate the square, eclipsing it, and, as it were, discarding it in the background as no longer needed. This, coupled with the manner of wearing the apron, each being strictly symbolical of the same thing, the conquest of the material by the spiritual, emphasizes the transition from the material to the spiritual realm. The position of the square and compasses on the altar and the manner of wearing the Master's apron are discussed in detail in Freemasonry, Its Hidden Meaning. See page 146 of that work. The working tools of the third degree are all the implements of Masonry, but especially the trowel. The spiritual man, quite naturally, is cognizant of both the material and the psychical, for, as Dr. Bucky points out, the acquisition of cosmic consciousness does not detract from the physical senses nor diminish the intellectual ability, but, on the other hand, enhances both. Just so the Master Mason continues to use the working tools of the two previous degrees, and we may assume he should be more adept in their uses than the apprentice or fellow craft. But he also has a tool peculiar to his own attainments, which the others are not yet capable of using. That tool, with its equilateral triangle, is a spiritual emblem. The third degree is referred to as the sublime degree of Master Mason. Sublime, elevated or exalted, awakening and uplifting emotion, producing a sense of elevated beauty, grandeur, etc., elevated by joy, elated. To make or cause to be sublime, variously to exalt, refine, purify. From a strictly academic viewpoint, what is sublime about the third degree? Sublime is indeed an exaggerated misnomer if we see in it only the exoteric explanation of the ritual and the lectures. Either those who in the past so named it were carried away by their enthusiasm, or they saw something in it besides the ritualistic explanation. Be assured we're not here attempting to disparage the degree, but rather to emphasize the fact that it is sublime. But its sublimity is of the essence, the secret doctrine, and not its obvious moral and ethical lesson. We quoted above the definition of sublime at length and with purpose. Turn back to the chapter on cosmic consciousness and note the recurrence of the words found in the definition of sublime. Elevated, exalted, uplifting emotion, elevated by joy, elated, to refine, purify. Perhaps we begin to glimpse why the third degree is called sublime. If it is what we suspect it to be, it can only be described by the same feeble words with which we attempt to describe cosmic consciousness, for be reminded that things equal to the same thing are equal to each other. The entered apprentice enters between the two columns, Boaz and Yakin. He is not told their significance, as it is neither the time nor place for such explanation. Nevertheless, the silent implication is present, and they bear for him the same significance as for the fellow craft who is given an explanation. As in most instances in Masonry, the fellow craft is offered but a rational explanation, and he is left to his own devices to discover the hidden meaning. In Freemasonry, its hidden meaning, we have included a lengthy quotation from Judge Thomas Troward relative to the esoteric significance of the two columns. Judge Troward points out that one, or the mathematical element, is law, while Boaz typifies personality or personal choice. Hence, the two columns symbolize the great universal law and personal choice. These columns at the entrance of the temple were not necessary for any material support, but represented a symbolical truth. The Temple of Solomon was the house of God, and the only reason for entering that house was to come into his presence. It is discovered that the only way to enter the temple is to pass between these two columns, the one Yakin law, the other Boaz personal choice. This is the truth the columns symbolize to the fellow craft. To enter the presence of God, it is not enough to recognize his existence. One must desire to be in his presence. He must come of his own free will and accord. Even this is not sufficient. When the objective mind realizes the urge to be in God's presence, one is faced with the existence of the other column, Yakin, the constant reminder that it must be in conformity with universal law. Symbology in Freemasonry is constant, it does not change. True, there are multiple meanings, but some or all meanings are always applicable. If this were not true, the symbols would be meaningless and the study of them impossible. The columns have the same meaning for the apprentice and the master mason, to whom they are not explained, the former because he is not ready for the explanation, the latter because he is presumed to have discovered their meaning. As for the fellow craft whose attention is directed to them and who is given the exoteric explanation as a clue to the esoteric symbology, by his very act of passing between them, the master should be reminded that he is entering the lodge of his own free will and accord, and that his progress must, as heretofore, be in accordance with universal law. He is seeking spiritual illumination, and it can be attained only under these two conditions. Our previous research has shown the unanimity of opinion of the various authorities, that always illumination is the result of complying with a certain set of conditions. Here in Masonry, we have a symbolic exposition of that same incontrovertible fact. Many Masons who are cognizant of the implications of the secret doctrine mistakenly look for them only in the working of the various degrees and entirely overlook the fact that they are present at all times, even in the prosaic stated communications when no degrees are conferred. Perhaps one of the outstanding symbolic expositions of our thesis is the progressive symbolism of the jewels of the officers of the lodge, continuing on through the past master's jewel. This symbology is not in consecutive order as one might expect, and for that reason is not readily apparent. Again, it may be questioned if the ritualistic explanation has not been corrupted over the period of time it has been in use. This thought occurs because there is not uniformity in all grand jurisdictions. None can gainsay that we meet on the level. Applying a deeper implication than the mere fact of meeting in a lodge room, all are on the material level of existence, symbolized by the level. The question arises if we part upon the square or on the plumb, and conversely if we act upon the plumb or on the square. If we act upon the square, then we part upon the plumb, and we discover a mystic implication. To act is physical material, all can do so, but if the parting means more than the temporary parting of each leaving the lodge and going his separate way, then it is likewise applicable to the degree of spiritual attainment, where all obviously part, for none attain to the same levels at the same time. Logically, the level should be the jewel of the junior warden, for the reason that the level typifies the material or physical, the lowest plane of the existence, and as such it should correspond to the lowest of the three offices. However, this does not harmonize with the fact that the junior warden represents Hiram the architect, the spiritual man. Likewise, the senior warden in all other instances typifies Hiram, king of Tyre, and Hiram of Tyre is obviously the symbol of the material, taking that symbology directly from the biblical account. As all the other symbology is highly consistent, it appears that some small inaccuracy must be condoned, that a greater one not be committed. Thus we reverse the usual order and start with the plumb, add the level with the two combining to make the square, which we see as the jewel of office of the worshipful master. The jewel of the worshipful master. Figure 1. Figure 2. Plate 6. The master wears a square in the position shown, Plate 6, Figure 1. He represents King Solomon, the complete man, composed of body, soul, and spirit, who has succeeded in raising the plumb of the psychical self-consciousness, above the level of the material, simple consciousness. The hypotenuse at the bottom of the square, making of it a right-angled triangle, is assumed, see Plate 6, Figure 2. He's completing his round of the seventh and last year in the chairs, emblematic of the ego who, having incarnated many, many times, is completing his last incarnation, and who needs return to earth no more. The worshipful master, having completed his term or round of labor for the lodge, will not return to the chairs. He has earned his reward and his release from the labors of the lodge. He is now a past master, and his jewel signifies that fact. Past master's jewels, Figure 1 above Grand Lodge of California. Figure 2 below Grand Lodge of Pennsylvania. Plate 7. There are extant two different types of past master's jewels. See Plate 7, Figures 1 and 2. It is nothing less than marvelous that both symbolize the same thing, particularly when it is considered that there is small likelihood that each was deliberately adopted for that purpose. It is extremely doubtful if those jurisdictions who use the 47th problem as the past master's jewel were cognizant of the implications of the compasses on the quadrant, else they would not have turned to the more obscure symbolism. Admittedly, the compasses on the quadrant is the more obvious. Plate 7, Figure 1. The symbology of the lodge, as we have discovered, represents the evolution of man from the physical being in the first degree endowed with but simple consciousness up through the fellow craft degree when the psychical self-consciousness is added, and onto the degree of master where the spiritual is encountered. Here is the complete man with all his attributes recognized by himself and ready to begin his labor. His first round is that of lowliest officer in the line. He emulates the soul of man on its 7 rounds, working up through the 7 chairs of the lodge until he becomes master of the lodge, that is, attains mastership. Having served his term of office, discharged his duties, and accomplished the end of his previous 6 years of labor, he is given the jewel of a past master, indicative of the fact that the complete man has succeeded in perfecting himself and is now the perfect man, the spiritual man. It must be known, in order to understand this symbology, that the zodiac is divided into 12 parts. According to occult teaching, each reincarnation is under the adjoining sign of the zodiac. hence a sign, 30 degrees, is a symbol of rebirth. And the moving over, the advancement of 30 degrees, is emblematic of rebirth. The compasses, as shown in Plate 7, Figure 1, are placed on the quadrant, explicitly informing that the square of the Master, which is 90 degrees, has been advanced, progressed, to use the astrological terminology, 30 degrees, sign of rebirth. And this is emphasized by the fact that the quadrant of the original square is still shown. The blazing sun has dual significance. It is emblematic of the brilliant enlightenment which accompanies the attainment of the spiritual. The sun is likewise the symbol of deity, of divinity, and therefore connotes that the past master has attained cognition of his own innermost divinity. We have said that the 47th problem carries the same symbology except that it is not as readily apparent. Here again the three planes of being are symbolized. The horizontal line represents the material. It is joined at a right angle to the plumb of the psychical, and the hypotenuse is added, emblematic of the addition of the spiritual. For Masonic purposes, the 47th problem is usually set forth as lines of 4 units in length, 3 units in height, with the resultant 5 units of hypotenuse. However, it is immaterial how long the horizontal or perpendicular lines may be. The square of the hypotenuse will always be the sum of the squares of the other two. This signifies, as taught in the ancient mysteries, that man is composed of the physical, the psychical, and the spiritual, but that regardless of his physical or psychical development, the spiritual will equal their sum total and be predominant. As applied to the past master's jewel, we discern his cognizance of the spiritual, his divine inheritance. It is the thesis of occult philosophy that the great truths of the universe and of man's being were revealed to man by deity in the dim past of the race, and that he then truly lived in the golden age. He followed the plans laid down on the trestle board, lived in close consciousness of his Creator, and obeyed universal law. In that day, man prospered and was happy and contented. The working tools of masonry were known and used. There was no veil in the temple, and the true word was possessed on earth. Man had not yet partaken of the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Peace and harmony, liberty, equality, and fraternity was the watchword and the fact. That which is variously labeled sin, error, illusion, entered into man's objective world through his erroneous thinking and his misunderstanding of universal law, as his own self-consciousness expanded a more objective and material world for him. He gradually lost his closeness to deity and consequently his spiritual awareness. Note well, deity did not withdraw from man, man withdrew, lost his closeness with God. The supreme remains constant. Man is the variable, but that which man can lose, man can again find. That the great truths might not be irrevocably lost to humanity, that they might be preserved so future generations could discover the right, the Supreme Architect seems to impart these truths or allow them to be discovered by certain individuals from generation to generation who preserve them. We have seen how, when the light has been nearly extinguished in times past, the Redeemer or Savior has appeared to restate the truth in the language of the time and the peoples to whom he came. Likewise, to this end, it is said that the knowledge was entrusted, veiled in allegory and illustrated by symbols, to certain organizations such as the Egyptian mysteries, the Eleusinian mysteries, the early Christian mysteries, the Rosicrucian movement of the Middle Ages, Bacon's secret society, and finally Freemasonry, which Manly Hall names the bright and glorious son of a mysterious and hidden father. In accordance with this plan, thousands, yes, even millions of individuals have contributed to the preservation of a doctrine, the very existence of which many were in utter ignorance. We see this more clearly when we realize that some of those in the past who may have suspected the existence of a secret teaching have made obvious changes in the ritual, which we may surmise were made to conform the ritual more closely to their ideas of what the secret doctrine should be. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and comment, and if you can, please consider donating to Wars of the Roses. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.